Hello. I suggest you tie a ribbon lace or an openwork border. Here is such a wonderful lace I got. This lace fits very simply. This is how the front side of this lace looks like. This is how the wrong side of this lace looks like. I knitted this lace from thin cotton. In 100 grams, I have 565 meters, and I used a thin 0.75 crochet hook. When knitting this lace, the first fragment of this lace is first performed, then this fragment is repeated for the entire necessary length of the entire lace. Then this lace is tied around the top. We perform the first loop. And we tie a chain of 8 air loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we close the chain in a ring. We have a semicircle. Insert the hook into the very first loop and stretch the working loop through the first loop. At the same time, the tail is conveniently bent and remains in the middle of the next row. Next, we perform 3 air loops of lifting, 1 cape on the hook, and in the resulting ring we will tie 3 columns with 1 cape. The first column with 1 cape, the second column with 1 cape, the third. Then we perform 3 air loops, 1, 2, 3. 1 cape on the hook, and in the resulting ring we will tie 4 columns with 1 cape. The first column with 1 cape, the second, third and fourth. Now we perform 7 air loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We turn the knitting to the other side, we perform 1 cape on the hook in the resulting arch of the previous row. We knit 4 columns with 1 cape. The first column with 1 cape, here is the second column, the third and fourth. Now we perform 3 air loops, 1, 2, 3. One cape on the hook, and in the same arch we will tie 4 more columns with 1 cape. The first column with 1 cape, the second column with 1 cape, the third and fourth. Now we perform 2 capes on the hook, and at the end of this lace we will tie a column with 2 capes. To climb to the next row, we perform 5 air loops. We turn the knitting to the other side, perform 1 cape on the hook and tie 4 columns with 1 cape into the resulting arch of the previous row. The first column with 1 cape, the second, third and fourth. Three air loops, 1 cape on the hook, and in the same arch we will tie 4 more columns with 1 cape. The first column, the second, third and fourth column with 1 cape. To move to the next row, we dial a chain of 7 air loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We turn the knitting to the other side, perform 1 cape on the hook and knit 4 columns with 1 cape into the previous arch. The first column with 1 cape, the second column with 1 cape, the third and fourth columns with 1 cape. 3 air loops and once again in this arch 4 columns with 1 cape. The first column, the second column, the third and fourth. Two capes on the hook, and at the end of this lace, under the air chain, starting the hook, we tie a column with 2 capes. To move to the next row, we dial 5 air loops. We turn the knitting to the other side and the knitting continues in the same sequence. We tied the same arch in the center, 4 columns with 1 cape, 3 air loops and 4 columns with 1 cape on the other side. On this side we have formed 2 arches. The next, third arch is tied in half, we perform 3 air loops. And now from this place we will perform the imposition of an openwork arch on the end. We perform 2 capes on the hook, we start the hook under the arch and tie a column with 2 capes. In this arch we will tie 8 columns with 2 capes. Between the columns we perform 2 air loops. Once again, 2 capes on the hook, in the same arch we tie the second column with 2 capes. 2 air loops, the third column with 2 capes, 2 air loops, the fourth column with 2 capes, 2 air loops, the fifth column with 2 capes, 2 air loops, the sixth column with 2 capes, 2 air loops, the seventh column, 2 air loops and the eighth column with 2 capes. We tied 8 columns with 2 capes. Now we perform a column without a cape in the first side arch. We turn the knitting to the other side and in each arch we knit 3 columns without a cape. The first, second, and third. Now we perform a picot of 3 air loops. 3 air loops, a connecting column in the base. In the next arch, we also tie 3 columns without a cape, a picot of 3 air loops tied the entire arch with columns without a cape. 6 picots formed on the tops. Now we perform another column without a cape for an air chain, 3 air loops, 1 cape on a hook and return to knitting the main pattern. In this side arch, we tie 4 columns with 1 cape, just as we knitted the previous arches. We perform 3 air loops and here again we tie 4 columns with 1 cape. At the end of this lace we make a column with 2 capes for an air chain. Then we perform 5 air loops to move to the next row. Further knitting continues in the same sequence until a solid side arch of 7 air loops is tied. After this one-piece arch, we tie the arch in half, perform 3 air loops, then perform 2 capes on the hook, go to knitting this arch. In this arch we tie 8 columns with 2 capes. Between the columns we perform 2 air loops. We tied the whole arch to the end. It turned out that there were 6 picots on the top. At the end, we perform a column without a cape under the air chain, then we dial 3 air loops. This is the second half of this side arch. Then we perform 1 cape on the hook and continue knitting in the same sequence until all the necessary length of this lace is tied. At the end, do not forget to perform a column with 2 capes. We tied the lace of the required length. This is what lace turns out to be. Now I will tie this lace on this side. We perform 5 air loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 cape on the hook, and in each arch we will tie 4 columns with 1 cape. The first column with 1 cape, the second, third and fourth. Then I perform 1 cape on the hook, and around these 4 columns with 1 cape we will tie an entanglement. We circle the hook around, grab the loop from the wrong side and pull it to the front side. Once again, 1 cape on the hook, we circle the hook around, grab the loop from the wrong side and pull it out to the front side. Now we tie all the loops with 1 loop, fasten them with air. It turned out to be such a column. In the next arch, we also tie 4 columns with 1 cape. 1 cape on the hook, the first column with 1 cape, the second column with 1 cape, the third and fourth. We put a cape on the hook, we circle the hook around the 4 columns, grab the loop from the wrong side and tighten it. Once again, we put the hook on the hook, we circle the hook around the columns, grab the loop from the wrong side and tighten it. Now we tie all the loops with 1 loop, fasten them with air. Thus, we will perform this whole side with such a binding. I tied this row completely to the end. This is how this lace or lace border looks in the end. This is the front side of this lace and the reverse side of this lace. I wish you creative success, obedient loops, do what you enjoy. Thank you so much for the warm and pleasant words in the comments. Let's knit together.